It is my joy and my honor to introduce Jenna to you guys. I would say that I aspire to be like Jenna, but that would be ridiculous. I will never be 22 again and founding an organization. I will never have had the vision at that young age and the commitment to go along with it. When I met Jenna and James, it was in 2010, and it was definitely love at first sight, and my whole family got to go on a trip with them to Lawala to see some of the beautiful work they do. So as a way of introduction, I wanted to name a few of my favorite things about Jenna Nardella. I love that she has no guile, that she is who she is, healthy, humble, and courageous, and that who you see is the real person. What a gift. I love that she is stunning, that she is stunning in what she says and how she writes and how she presents herself, and that she's not afraid of that and doesn't dim her light. I love that Jenna Nardella is faithful to her heart and what she believes, and when that leads her outside of institutions and organizations, she will go there. We all love, I'm sure, how hopeful she is. She can bring a smile and joy into a space that other people might see as pretty grim. She is not afraid to step up to the plate, and when she does, she can hit it out of the freaking park. For example, the Democratic National Convention. She's a visionary, she's a friend, she's a gifted writer, Jenna Nardella.
Okay, that was so beautiful. Thank you, Becca, for being my priest and teaching me so much. And I'm so grateful to the library and Salon 615 to being here, and to each of you for coming and being a part of this. The first time I fell down a mountain, it was unexpected, as most falls are. I was 17 years old, and my friends and I were hiking the Indian Peaks of wilderness of Colorado. As we reached the 13,000-foot summit, the wind picked up, and the rain turned to a downpour. But the views were like a drug, stealing breath and thought and awareness. I felt the flush of wonder as I looked across that open tundra. After cozying ourselves for a time behind the protection of a stone wall, we began our descent. We scurried down the steep slope, chatting as water beat down our brightly colored jackets. The rocks, of course, were wet from the rain, but we were used to such conditions. Thunder, lightning, hail, it was all part of the adventure. But suddenly, my boot slipped on the wet scree beneath me, and I fell forward. My body picked up momentum, flipping several times downward and only stopping because I smacked into a boulder. And though my hip and shoulders throbbed and my forehead was bleeding, what I felt most intensely was the shock of my own carelessness. I had climbed enough mountains to know the dangers of getting too comfortable. But there I was, bruised and bleeding, no longer trusting the trail beneath me. My work in Africa and the pursuit of justice, like a mountain storm, blindsided me just when I thought I knew what I was doing. But no one tells you about the mess that comes with trying to do a good thing in the world. Or maybe they do, but you stand convinced that your story is different than theirs. You see, I was 21 years old when I committed myself to a vision that included serving African villages where women and children walk more than 5 miles a day to find water to keep them alive. It included advocating for families whose immune systems were so weak from HIV that diseases in that water caused mothers to bury their babies and children to bury their parents. It has included building an organization over the last 11 years that has provided clean water for more than 1 million people. And it has included the consistent urge to walk away. And as an American in the millennial generation, I came of age in a culture of self-actualization and instant gratification, and I was ill-prepared for the work and patience that justice requires. Just when I thought I knew what I was doing, Africa blindsided me with the hard truth that redeeming and restoring is a lifelong commitment. In the same way, Americans' attention span has shortened to sound bites and Facebook likes. But the work of justice requires that we dig in for the long haul, give our lives and image away, and be willing to wage a long defeat on behalf of the poor. There's no better place to learn this lesson than the Marsabit Desert of northern Kenya, close to the border of Ethiopia. Its landscape is difficult to explain because it's a place of such extremes. It's not just hot, it's oppressively hot. It's not just dry, it's earth-crumblingly dry. It's not just poor, it's desperately poor. And as you fly above the region, the land below looks like the surface of the moon. You see twisters of sand, dust, and heat dancing across the barren landscape. You feel thirsty just looking at the vast desert. The first time I landed on a dirt airstrip, and a man named Yegon met us. Yegon and his team were committed to bringing health and clean water to communities that had no such access. The inhabitants of this desert were a nomadic people who traveled for days to find remnants of vegetation for their animals to eat and to live. One need only be in Marsabit for a day to feel the dramatic effects of a water crisis. Yegon had a vision and he wanted us to see it. We traveled for hours across the moon-like terrain until we found ourselves in remote schools where 100 children gathered to learn among an expanse of twisters and dust. Yegon introduced us to the teachers he had been working with on the plans for rainwater catchment tanks. The vision was bold, but we were bound together in the conviction that the plans were possible to execute, and we could see real change in a place that most of the world had virtually ignored. So the next year, I returned to the desert of Marsabit and traveled for hours with Yegon to witness the craftsmanship of the school's new rain catchment tanks, the newly constructed earthen dams for the animals, and the impressive engineering of a deep well borehole drilled successfully in one of Earth's harshest environments. The vision Yegon had laid out for us and that we had funded had taken shape, but there was one problem: no water. When I turned the new tap connected to the storage tanks, I felt only hot air. I walked up the hill to view the edge of the dam. What was supposed to be filled with water for animals was a cracked prune of a landscape. A goat lay on its side in the dusty sand, dead from dehydration. The new borehole was nearly dry, eking out an insufficient amount of water that we had designed to serve hundreds of people and their 7,000 animals. Instead, scattered herds of camels and donkeys stood with their owners, waiting their turn to drink from the dribble of the trough. Marsabit had been suffering a severe and unexpected drought for more than a year. The water storage had run out nearly 6 months before. Mothers, fathers, babies, camels, donkeys, and goats were continuing to fight the long defeat of a life with no water, which doesn't leave much life after all. As I stood under the merciless sun, it became clear to me that the laws of return on investment don't apply in many places around the world. The unjust forces of nature can cripple even the strongest, most capable person, community, or ideal. In this case, all the persistence, money, and work that the people of Marsabit and Bloodwater had done over the years came to nothing tangible. People and animals were still dying from a drought that mocked our best intentions. As Americans, many of us assume that if something needs to be done, there's a way to do it. But sometimes human capability meets its threshold, and we learn the truth about what we can and cannot do. In Marsabit, we can partner with the best organization in the region. We can raise all the money we need, mobilize the communities with excellent methods, train in best practices of hygiene, build solid latrines, and construct foolproof rain tanks. But we cannot make the rain. And I hadn't considered what would happen if a project failed, if clouds refused to shower on certain parts of the earth. So far, I had only experienced the windfall of blessing, and I suppose I expected it to stay with me. But Marsabit is a place that will make you question many truths you thought you understood about the world. How hard work pays off, how hope comes through in the end, how God is merciful. My convictions began to crumble like dirt beneath my feet. I thought I could change Africa until I realized that I could not make the rain come. Marsabit was like the mountain of my youth. I wasn't seasoned enough to expect the fumbling and the stumbling, the head over head falling, the stillness after impact. The American church might be experiencing that kind of same surprise, especially because it has been like a millennial in its attention span to justice. We passed around a documentary about children affected by a war in Uganda. We gave up our birthdays for clean water. We marked red X's on our hands. We bought shoes that gave a pair to another. We made a stand and started our own nonprofits. We self-actualized through sharing our voices on blogs and mobilized resources. There was momentum, and we could feel it, a sense that people of faith had caught on to the fact that Jesus actually cared about the poor and the marginalized. The church put aside fear and judgment and took up mercy and generosity by pushing the U.S. government to do something about the AIDS crisis in Africa. Christians mobilized support for the President's emergency plan for AIDS relief, which is now sustaining the lives of millions of HIV-positive men, women, and children around the world. And that was a 180-degree turn from a Barna poll in 2001 that stated only 3% of evangelical Americans would be willing to help someone with HIV. But then the Red campaign faded in its coolness. The work of doing good got inconvenient, and other things caught our attention. My question today is, will we dig in for the long haul, give our lives and image away, and be willing to wage a long defeat on behalf of the poor? Trust me, the glitz of standing for a cause will wear off. Maybe the leaders of the organizations we've followed disappoint us. Maybe we find out that doing good is messy, more complex than we want, the problems more convoluted, the solutions less clear than our slogans suggest. Or we face our own Marsabits, where the rain just won't come, and we grow weary. We lose sight of the vision. We question whether justice and mercy are even worth the pursuit. We have an urge to grab onto the next big thing and start something else. You see, we need to feel the gratification of our goodwill. We want to see its immediate results. And the world is going to move faster and continue to tempt us to abandon the disciplines of patience, presence, prayer, steadfastness, relationship, consistency, faithfulness, hope. Smartwatches, quicker turnarounds, and the speed of consumption fool us into thinking that redemption is fast. But there are still truths about the world that we ought not ignore amidst the sheen of the immediate. If you look at the amount of time it takes in Africa for corn to grow, or for a girl to walk with her bucket to the nearest watering hole, you find that the pace of life and the growth of people follow the pace and growth of the land. Or if you're witness to the achievement of a community coming together to build its own rainwater catchment tank, only to be followed by an unexpected season of drought, you begin to expect a slow-paced and uneven path in all things. And as we continue to address the world's injustices, that path will be the same. In Kenya, they say pole pole, or slowly by slowly. In Zambia, they say panono panono, brick by brick. And they're not referring just to speed or pace, but also to that uneven up and down, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back nature of both work and life amidst challenging circumstances, broken relationships, and deep-set cultural constraints. There's never an expectation that life will go smoothly or that you will reach your destination with expediency. slowly by slowly expects ebb and flow. It sees healthcare happening in the midst of overwhelming sickness. It brings 10,000 liters of water, even if 100,000 are needed. Brick by brick, there are hospital wings and freshwater wells, and yet millions more women continue to walk miles for water. Slowly by slowly, we expect to wage the long defeat and seek after the new heavens in the midst of a nearly blinding brokenness. Let us remember that the work of justice is a long-suffering narrative, both for the individuals who are today enduring the brunt of the world's worst injustices and for the people of faith committed to moving the needle. Martin Luther King Jr. rightfully noted, "Human progress is neither automatic nor inevitable. Every step toward the goal of justice requires sacrifice, suffering, and struggle. It requires the tireless exertions and passionate concern of dedicated individuals." And he would know. And as I look at my own life, saturated by expectations of expediency, ease, and self-actualization, I tremble at Dr. King's words, because it means that the pursuit of justice will cost something significant and that it will not be easy. As the idealism fades, do I have what it takes to stay with it? As the world moves on to other flashy invitations, do we have the wherewithal to stick with the causes we said we cared about 5 years ago? Do we have the will to sustain slowly by slowly commitments into the next 5 years? I love the call in Isaiah 58 because it delivers an ambitious mandate that weighs heavy on those of us who seek to examine issues of justice, poverty, faith, and conviction. Isaiah says, "Is this not the kind of fasting I have chosen, to loose the chains of injustice and undo the thongs of the yoke, and to let the oppressed go free? Is it not to share your bread with the hungry and to bring the homeless poor into your house? When you see the naked, to clothe them, and not to turn away from your own flesh and blood?" The call is to loose the bonds of injustice, undo the thongs of the yoke, let the oppressed go free, share your bread with the hungry, bring the homeless poor into your house, clothe the naked. But let me be a witness that these are not things that happen all at once. They are not once and done actions that you check off like a task list and move on to the next new thing. The challenge is to wake up each day and live out the actions of Isaiah, slowly by slowly, as you faithfully enter the world. They do not require the best technology, a fancy brand, or even the promise of shining results. But they do require the commitment to be present, to be consistent, and to be willing to be there with people and places for the long haul. Loose, undo, share, bring, clothe. Our pursuit of justice ought not be a sprint. And real change happens in stops and starts. Accomplishment mingles with failure. And you need to give yourself permission to accept that you will experience both. I had once thought that hope was easy. Belief in the good came easily to me. And now I realize it was passion that came easily. When I was a young adult, my passions were a gift. They propelled me forward. But at some point, the wind disappears, and hope must take over while you wait, expectant in still waters. True hope is always hard. It is not passive wishing. It's an active exercise, a choice, an intention. Hope means giving up apathy and despair and instead embracing the uncertainty that terrifies you. It's the sacrifice of keeping your heart soft. It's the determination to stick with it, even if you may not succeed. Why would you build a rain tank when you have lived a year under cloudless skies? Why would you teach your neighbors how to care for water when there is no water to care for? Why risk the fool by believing in a good God when the earth continues to stand dry and children die watching for rain? When I look at the deserts of Africa, sometimes I wonder if the tears of the grieving are the only drops of water that come. I pray, but with disbelief. When I was in high school, my classmates voted me most likely to devote my life to a lost cause. And some days I take it as a compliment. But the thing about lost causes is that they're only lost if you leave them behind. Because of resistance, you may want to write them off. But if you stay in there, and if you keep hoping in action, if not in feeling, you may discover they are not lost after all. You may discover they are the most beautiful, extravagant examples of abundance in your life. You may start keeping your eyes open to causes that seem the most lost of all. But it is not easy, and it is a slowly by slowly experience. Flying back to Marsabit 2 years after the drought, I saw a different land. Day in and day out, the people of Marsabit had continued on with utter resilience to survive. They faithfully built the rain tanks and repaired the dams as dust devils swept across their land. They developed health and hygiene clubs, they dug pit latrines, and carried on with a commitment to improve their lives regardless of the circumstances they could not control. Many people in the U.S., myself included, would consider an empty rain tank a failure. But with dignity, responsibility, and hope, these communities had pressed on. The rains had finally come one October. The skies filled the tanks and the dams with water as if it was manna from heaven. Because the people of Marsabit had worked throughout the drought to construct rain catchment systems, they were able to collect every drop. It's not a perfect story, and it probably never will be. There are still stretches of drought and too many deaths and so many 3 steps forward, 2 steps back experiences. But look at the commitment they made to stay in it with hope and resilience. And we are committed to Marsabit, to standing with them through the hardships, even when our expectations of success are not met. We've been walking with them now for nearly 8 years and are seeing small and slow change. And it will probably take another 8 years to see just a little bit more. In the beginning days of Bloodwater, I thought the vision was mine to accomplish. And the truth is, it never was mine. The work of healing and redeeming a broken world belongs to God. I have a small part to play, and I am responsible for that part, but in the end, it's not on my shoulders. Our calling is to do the one more thing in front of us, and then the next. If stepping into this calling means stepping into hard times, don't we want to still be there? The surprising truth about changing the world is that when we care for our part in the world, the God of heaven knits these small pieces together into something beautiful. But, as my priest Becca has taught me, we're not called to change the world. We're called to love the world. And to love the world, we are the ones who must change. And each of you is writing a story with your life. And your job is to step into the world and practice, put into practice that which you have been given. To consider what it looks like to pursue justice in a slowly by slowly and committed way. How will you develop the spiritual and emotional and physical tools to be agents of that slow yet desperately needed renewal? If we can remain faithful to our calling to care for the orphan and the widow and the thirsty and the oppressed, faithful through the stops and starts, faithful through the desperate days and cloudless skies, faithful through the despair or disinterest, then we will see how our collective commitments will tear at a corner of the darkness. We will be a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail. Our people will rebuild the ancient ruins and will raise up the age-old foundations. We will be called repairer of broken walls, restorer of streets with dwellings. And as we seek to faithfully love the world slowly by slowly, let us watch and wonder what God will do. Thank you.
beautiful. And now we get a chance to have some conversation. So as we welcome Jenna back, I also want to welcome Dan Hazeltine, who is the co-founder and director of our Artist Relationships for Bloodwater. He is the lead singer and founding member of 3-time Grammy award-winning band Jars of Clay and electric pop trio The Hawk in Paris. He's also the author of the award-winning children's book, The One, the Only Magnificent Me. He's a public speaker. He's a justice advocate. He's a columnist, a film composer. He is the full package. He resides beyond the quilted curtain in Franklin, Tennessee, with Katie, his wife of 18 years, and his 2 fort-building sons, Noah and Max. Social justice is something he cares about deeply, and he wants to keep connecting it to the artist community and to the wider world. They are both awesome, and it is a privilege to be able to have a conversation with them, Jenna and Dan. So I'm going to start out with an easy question and then go harder and harder. So how did you think of the name Bloodwater?
That's a good question. So the name Bloodwater actually came, I was on a plane returning from my first trip to Africa, and it was the first time that I had learned about the clean water crisis. I had no idea that there were people that lived in communities where they didn't have access to clean water, and was there to learn about HIV and AIDS. I was there to just figure out, what does it look like in Africa versus in the U.S. After Jenna had, she mentioned in that book that there was that Barna poll that said that only 3% of evangelicals would help somebody with AIDS. And so I was really there to figure out why. And on that plane ride, back from experiencing it and learning about water, and I was really wrestling with those two things. There's got to be some connection between these things, HIV and clean water. And the more I thought about it, this whole idea of remembering the physiological accounts of the crucifixion, and how when we finally knew that Jesus had died, they describe it and say, well, the reason we knew is because both blood and water had flown from his side, and I think that was the moment where I recognized, I was like, okay, well, the two things that it seems to me at the time that Africans need for survival are the very things that represent the sacrifice that gave us life. And so I wrote it on a napkin, like you do, and carried it home with me. Bloodwater.
So this book is great. I don't know how many of you have purchased it before and started reading it while Jenna was talking, but the story is grounded in individual stories that affected both of you guys tremendously. For Jenna, a homeless man in San Francisco. There was a guy named Kevin. There was a woman named Pamela. And what I think is interesting is the ability that you guys have to take an individual story like Marsabit or these beautiful little stories and extrapolate them to global solutions and images and visions. How do you make that transition for both of you guys from an individual story to a global movement?
I think this is something that I learned from Dan early on, which was if you throw the numbers and the statistics, it's very, very hard to then consider the people behind them. And his mission to go to Africa for the first time, I remember him saying, was to put a face to the statistic and to put a name to it. And I don't know how to approach millions of people, but I do know how to approach Pamela. And I think it does affect how we do charity or development work, is if you're thinking about the numbers, you're going to respond that way. But if you think about the whole person, the one family, it really changes the way that you address those issues.
Yeah, I think that's so much of it. I think it really comes down to a human story. It really does come down to a single person that we can connect with and resonate with and recognize that's the life that we get to invest in, pour into, and we get to make a difference. And it really is trying to. It almost seems counter to the whole idea that whole sense that how do you fix a really huge problem? Well, but it's slowly by slowly, and it's one person at a time, and it's relational, and it's hard work, but it's human work. And I think always holding on to that human story is what has allowed us to kind of do so much through Bloodwater.
Okay, so I keep imagining y'all traveling on a bus together around as you started this organization and you went on these roads and, like you're in fancy lights and winning Grammys and raising money to build wells and all this. And my question is really about your egos. And especially as a writer, and as you need to have a big, healthy ego to think what you have to say is important enough to put down in a book. We need people with big, healthy egos to do that work and to be artists that stand up for it. They trip you up. As soon as you write a book about 1,000 wells, somebody goes, really, I built 1,004. It happens. Really, you won 3 Grammys, big deal, I won 4. It happens that way. And so you get this big ego, little ego, competition, cooperation, all this good stuff. So how did it play out for y'all where you were able to have this relationship, to have healthy egos, to be humble enough to do the work? Like, where's the balance and what's the secret?
It would have been really difficult if we weren't so humble. No.
We're the best
I
at
can
being
see
humble.
it. Yeah, exactly.
We're the most humble.
I'm
Yeah.
a teeny bit more humble.
There aren't many awards for humility. It's sort of a sad part of our culture. Jenna knows this. She learned it when she was out on the road with us. The road life has a way of keeping you humble. It's not so glamorous. It's not most of the time. We would often say that that touring and performing was travel occasionally interrupted by a performance, and it really was just going from place to place and thing to thing. But there is this, I guess I would call it innocence, naivete that we had early on. I don't know that it was that we felt like we knew what we were doing. It was never about that. The reason Bloodwater exists as it does now, and the sort of the culture that's been growing around it, has always been around questions, and because we've always had to approach it like, look, we're not the experts here. We're the ones that are trying to figure this out. We're the ones that are simply here to ask another question. And I think that was just the culture of it all. We didn't know enough to have much pride involved in the work we were doing, because it literally was us stumbling over each other, trying to figure out, how do we tell this story the right way? How do we honor Africans? How do we give them, affirm their dignity and not just make a fool of ourselves, and not just add to the cynicism that existed in culture over humanitarian causes or helping people. I grew up in an era where we rolled our eyes at Bono when he started talking about, doing something for people who are hungry. I just remember going, oh boy, just play another song. But it's very easy. Like if you're a kid and you're gonna give to somebody to help someone, and then that fails, you're not gonna give again, not for a long time. And so we knew that we were always sort of teetering on that line of, what story are we gonna tell? And it was never a place of pride. So I don't know. That's my perspective on that. I
think the naivete was really strong, and the idealism was so big, and so maybe the ego too, just in terms of like the vision of what could be, or like what we could do, and so I think that the ego shrunk pretty quickly, as Dan was talking about it, because we were a rock band and a 22-year-old in a hot pink skirt showing up to like places that I should never have been. And there's plenty of embarrassing stories in the book to show that I had no idea what I was doing. And, you know, the band does great music, but we would be sitting in a room full of people who have been in the fight for HIV for the last 20 years, and we were late to the table. And so it was a lot of learning, and I think in those first 6, 9, 12 months, it was just lots of embarrassing stories that allowed us to learn and say, okay, where is our place? Like, and even though there are people out there who, you know, it took us 10 years to provide 1 million people with water, and there are other organizations out there that have done it in 2 or whatever it is, our 1 million mattered. And again, it's that one at a time. And I think it actually helped us to define success differently, and to be able to celebrate that which has been in front of us, and to be good stewards of that first, and then see if there's more growth opportunities later.
That's really good. Okay, so you brought up Bono. I mean Bono.
Yes, yes.
So do y'all have Bono stories?
We do have Bono stories, and I really think...
Oh, tell.
I think Jenna needs to tell hers first, because hers is really it's the good one.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was a really passionate college student. I was an AIDS activist. You'll read about this in the book that all of you are going to buy. And I attended a seminar where somebody was talking about all this AIDS activism that was happening on a college campus, different than ours. And so I was a lecture hall like this, and I stood up and, you know, was very earnest and said, so what is it that's caused your students on your campus to be so engaged and committed to the HIV/AIDS crisis? And the professor said, one word, Bono. And I said, well, what's a Bono, and how do we get one on our campus?
See, I thought y'all were talking about Cher's husband.
Yeah. Maybe we are. Yeah.
Wait, what's your story?
Well, you know, Bono's been very gracious to Bloodwater over the years.
And I know who he is now, by the way.
Yeah.
He's a person.
He sort of surprised us at different points and jumped in and supported the organization. And sometimes supporting the organization just means him saying the name of the organization. You know, it's just in the context of alignment, he was willing to do that for us. But the first time that I went to Africa, that first trip I went on, he was traveling around and talking to on college campuses, and then in groups of artists, trying to get people to care about HIV and AIDS and poverty. And so he showed up at a small gathering of artists in Nashville, and it just happened to be the very afternoon I was getting on a plane to go to Malawi for the first time. And so he and I had a good but short conversation, but it was a good connection, because Malawi was the first place that he ever traveled to when he went to Africa, and then it was the first place I was going. And so I was getting ready to get up and leave the meeting early to catch a plane, and so he stood up and went to give me a hug. And so I went to give him a hug, and I went like this to kind of reach around, and somebody snapped a photo of this picture. And the picture, it looks like I'm reaching around and taking a big swing at him. And he's kind of doing almost the same thing the other way. So it looks like I was getting in a fight with an Irishman. And so I have this picture of Bono and I getting into a little fight at the art house.
Nice.
So yeah, it was a great.
Did he
great
wear
moment.
his glasses the whole time y'all were talking?
I don't think he can see without them.
But were they yellow?
They were then, yeah, they were yellow then.
Wow.
Yes. Blue blockers, I believe they call those.
Okay, so you say in the book that when you guys were starting out, you saw the American church as a sleeping giant, which I took offense to as a lifelong recipient of checks from the church for 24 years. No, But my question seriously is, do you still think the American church is a sleeping giant? Both of y'all. Look, don't look at him, Jenna. This is your book signing. You
I know,
have to
really.
answer.
Well, first of all, yes, Dan, please answer this. First of all, I think it was Bono who provided that term in that meeting, where he was actually trying to get the church involved in the HIV/AIDS crisis, and was the one that called it a sleeping giant. I think the giant has woken up a little bit and is starting to move. But I fear, like I was talking about earlier tonight, I fear this sort of millennial attention span, or this look for trying to stay culturally relevant, particularly in the evangelical church, where there's so many millennials that are a part of it, and it's really hard to stay with anything for a long time and to stay with one place or one community. And I haven't lost hope in the church in that way, but I just think we have to have a completely different paradigm shift, and have to have a different definition of success within the church in terms of the pursuit of justice. And so if we can, as a church, see ourselves as different, but in the right places and in the right ways, that says we're going to be there for the long haul, we're going to stick with it, we're going to stand on the losing side, we're going to stand for the lost causes, even if it's not cool, even if it's not trending, and you can't talk about it on Twitter or something, like just being able to stay with it.
Well done. Yeah, I don't know that our problem is that the church is asleep. I think our problem is that the giant is afraid. I think fear is a big problem that we currently have in the church. I think we see it every day in the way that the church responds or reacts to cultural issues, conversations about things that are hard to talk about, the venom with which we've somehow found ourselves communicating over social media. I think that becomes a huge barrier for the church right now. And as we seek to try to love and serve people well, and humble ourselves to be able to say, in cultures that we don't understand, how can we help you and serve you? Sometimes the church does what humanity does when they don't understand something. They either try to control it or they try to kill it. And I think we have a space where the church has to become a little less afraid of those things, so that we can authentically reach and understand that we have all the tools necessary to love people well, and to not have to be afraid of things that we don't understand. AIDS is still one of those things that many people in the church don't understand. Poverty, other cultures, societal differences, like those are all the things that we get to step into and have a role to play in elevating that conversation about how do we love people that are different from us. But we don't get to do that if we're afraid. And I think that's, so maybe we're not asleep. Now we're cowering in the corner.
That's beautiful. So, 2 quick questions. One, so you can't answer these long. You have to answer these short. I kept thinking that in the story of you guys coming together and creating this and moving out into the world in such a profound way, was it luck, chance, or providence?
All of the above.
Yeah.
Which one most? How do y'all talk about that? I mean, do you talk about it like it was set out there for you and you were just following this path that was already there? Or it just happened this way? Or, I mean, how do you explain it? That's what I guess, how do you explain it, that it happened this way?
I feel like I didn't really know how to explain it until I had to sit down and write it out and try to make meaning of all of these different experiences over the last 11 years and over the whole of my life. And it seems as though that there is just a beautiful adventure story that each of us get to be a part of. And I don't know how much of it is, it's planned that these 3 things are going to happen so that you get here, but it's certainly it's certainly an adventure. And it's something that right in the moments where I felt like this story is ending, like this journey is not going forward, there's a trap door, there's a third way, There's some kind of act of providence I believe in that opened a door that I just hadn't seen. And then there was a lesson for all of us to take and then put in our pocket and carry on, and then we forget it and forget more things, and then they're offered more. It's beautiful. Like, it's really, really beautiful. It's such a gift to have gotten the chance to sit down and try to piece all these different experiences together and see this arc of a story that we didn't write. So it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I won't add any really much more to that, other than to say I think we probably stumbled into the idea of trying to live, finding the next question. When you're always just looking for another question behind the question, you don't really ever have to worry that the conversation is going to end by someone finding that definitive answer that just shuts it down. You know, there's always going to be another question. And that allows kind of the story to keep going. It allows the conversation to keep happening. And I think we were always surprised that there was another question. And then that kept moving the story forward.
That's beautiful. So people fall in love with you guys. They fall in love with the story. They fall in love with the mission. I mean, is it done? So you build 1,000 wells and then it's done. There's nothing else we need to do? Or what do we do? Like, we buy the book, we get engaged, or what do we do? That's my big question, I guess.
Well, you know, there's a lot of ways to get involved. Bloodwater really, I mean, I hope if anybody's been connected to the organization at any level that you've recognized it as an organization that really tries desperately to be a welcome for people, an on-ramp into helping people. Like, we don't ever want to be that organization that presents the problem and never gives an opportunity to step into it in a tangible way. And so even tonight, I mean, there's a lot of ways that you can be a part of it. One of the things that you can do, and I don't have one up here right now, but there's these little pieces of cardboard that say #my1000wells. And I think that is simply, we want you to write down, you have them out there, right? Those big cards. What's your audacious goal? What's the thing that you want to be inspired to do? How do you want to step into your story further? Write it down, and then use social media. Put it on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, and help us get the word out about the book. But sometimes the best way to move a vision forward is to write it down and show somebody else. So do that. That inspires us when you get inspired. So that's one way. Probably one of the biggest ways is we really want to celebrate the story of 1,000 Wells by, we have this thing called 1,000 for 1,000, and it's in the next 1,000 hours, which sounds like a long time, but it's really not.
How long is it?
It's through September, yeah. I would have to use more than the appendages that I have to really figure it out. But the goal for us is to help provide clean water for 2 schools in this area of northern Kenya that Jenna was showing you pictures of. There's 2 schools there that we can provide clean water for, and it serves around 800 to 1,000 people. And so in the next 1,000 hours,
4 days is 100 hours.
Oh,
okay.
She was a math major.
What?
Math major.
Oh,
No,
so
what'd
she
you say?
should.
42 days.
It's 42
Okay.
days.
Oh gosh. Wow.
So that's.
Okay.
So you guys got to get on
now
it.
Keep going. I just was stuck back there, and I needed you to help me.
So in
along.
your, you guys all have this little card in it, and it says 1,000 for 1,000. It's just a way, if you want to give and support this and help us provide clean water. I mean, the best way for us to celebrate the story of 1,000 Wells is to keep working, to keep telling the stories and keep helping people provide access to water. So that's one of the ways that you can really help, and I think that's a huge one. We really are trying to get the book on the bestseller list. As is the world that we live in, those things matter. And to get this book out there, buy it, tell your friends about it, that grows the story of Bloodwater. It helps us gain more advocates, more people connected to the story, more people who can volunteer and help, more people who can donate. The work is really good work. It's great work, and it serves real people in places where people have real needs. It saves lives, and we want you to be a part of that. So one way to do that is really to just, help us champion this book and this story. Jenna did a phenomenal job writing this story and putting herself as humanly as possible into the pages, as you heard from what she already talked about. Get that out there. Help us to get that out there. So I think those are just a few ways that you can be a part of the story.
In the book, Jenna asks several questions about, what part of someone else's culture am I supposed to respect, and what part am I supposed to disrupt? How do I know the line between my truth and someone else's truth? This book calls us to reflection and to think about our own lives and how to live in them. She's going to be out there signing books, and she can answer individual questions. We are grateful you all are here and a part of this great celebration. Thank you very much.
Thank you.